Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. In today's special episode, we sat down with Daniel DiMartino, founder of the Dissident Project. Its goal is to educate high school students in America about the dangers of socialist regimes. How does the Chinese Communist regime tie into what he experienced in Venezuela and what he sees playing out here in America? Let's dive in. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back on the show.
Thank you, Tiffany.
So right now in the U.S., especially in the education field, there's a lot of talk about critical race theories, other terms, and there's a lot of hatred towards this country, especially America. And so you're from Venezuela. What do you see happening here that maybe has some Marxist origins?
Yes, well, I see what so many high schools and colleges are teaching young kids and teenagers and college-age students, that it is really the fault of like America that bad things happen in the world, or that this country is not really superior or exceptional to the rest of the world, or even that the way to solve our problems is to imitate the policies that really destroyed my home country of Venezuela. And that concerns me because, some people will say, no, it's a lie that they're teaching these things in schools. Well, it is not, because I went to college in the United States and I saw it firsthand how teachers push an ideology on students. And if a student is, not political enough and not already resistant to that, they will think that the professor is right because they don't even present an alternative point of view. And so that's why I began and started the Dissident Project, which is a nonprofit organization, part of Young Voices, another nonprofit PR firm, that we have a group of 8 speakers who came from socialist countries, and we're sending ourselves to high schools all over the country to speak about our experiences, why we left Venezuela, why they left North Korea, Hong Kong, and Cuba to come to the United States. We're all young people who can connect with the high school students and tell them more stories, and also why the United States is a great country, and why we should not imitate the policies that so many politicians are proposing that are just like those that destroyed our home countries.
So on the note of this Dissident Project, why high schools specifically? Why not universities?
Yes, because I've already been speaking at universities for several years, and the experience is very different from speaking to high schools. Unfortunately, when you go and speak at a university, it's usually a conservative or libertarian, a student organization that invites you. And therefore, the people who show up at your event are mostly already in agreement with you. And therefore, you're just there as kind of like a motivational speaker. Some people might be there with having some doubts, and it's useful. I'm not downplaying their importance. But when you go to a high school, first you get much more attendance than at college events, where maybe up to 50 people will go. In high schools, maybe at least 50 people will go, because the teacher sends the whole class. And sometimes the whole school goes, and sometimes like a whole grade goes. And so it's, more people go, and then it's people who are not there because they self-selected into being there, or they went because they already wanted to. The teacher sent them. So most of the students are not even politically engaged. Most of the students are not in agreement with you. They're just representative of the community where they're from, and with politically diverse points of views, with political points of views that are not even developed yet because they're too young. And so it's a great moment in their lives to hear about the experience of somebody who came from a socialist country and internalize that before they go into college, into the brainwashing leftist machine.
And so what kind of results or impact have you seen through this project?
Well, I spoke at a high school in Massachusetts back in February, in a very liberal area, middle-class area. And I had a fantastic experience, much better than I ever expected to have. Some of the school administration was not very happy that I went, but they agreed to have me, and the teachers who invited me were very happy to have me. Because they did, of course, want their students to hear about it. And the students had a fantastic reaction. Like, they wanted to even take pictures with me. They asked great questions. Like 60, 70 students showed up. It was just, very fulfilling, because you saw them learn about something that they were not being taught in school, what happens in Venezuela, and why the story of Venezuela is so important for America.
And so going forward, since critical race theories and all these about like hating your country is being taught in schools, what can be done to counter that?
Right. You know, there's a growing movement within the conservative movement and the right in the United States that is about banning critical race theory. And personally, I agree with that. However, it is not enough to stop teaching students bad things. We have to start teaching them good things. And that's what the Dissident Project is about. It's about teaching students that America is a worthy, exceptional country. That's why immigrants like us came to America, immigrants who are close to the age of these students that we're speaking to. And that it's not okay to try to destroy America to turn it into a socialist country. That instead of seeking to expand government, we need to do things in a smart way. We need to do the things in a way that respects our institutions, that respects our constitution, that allows people to be free to choose economically, politically, socially, instead of having the government pick for us. Because that's what led to the disaster of Venezuela. We're a nonpartisan organization. We're not here to tell students to vote for the Democrats, to vote for the Republicans. We're here to tell them that the government owning the means of production or controlling businesses or, restricting our liberties, it's a bad thing. And that we're blessed to live in America where so far that hasn't happened, but where there are people who want to make it happen and we cannot allow them to.
So you mentioned, Daniel, how you kind of saw Venezuela go from maybe middle-class American lifestyles to really collapsing. And so what really pushed that? What was behind that in Venezuela?
Well, it was Hugo Chavez who was elected in 1998, just a few months after, a month really after before I was born. And his government changed Venezuela from the richest country in Latin America to the poorest. Venezuelans were told that Venezuela is not Cuba. We will never become a socialist country because we have oil, because we're rich, because we're a democracy. Cuba was not a democracy. It was a coup that happened in Cuba. This is a free election, that how we elected Chavez. It cannot change our country like this. And the reality is that today, Venezuela is even less free than Cuba economically. So it's true, Venezuela is not Cuba. It is worse than Cuba now. And these are the same people who are telling people all over the world, Colombia is in Venezuela, America is in Venezuela, Nicaragua is in Venezuela. And guess what? When these politicians succeed, they turn their countries into something like Venezuela. And that's why we cannot allow that to happen in the United States. And so it was Chavez who nationalized businesses, who imposed price controls on the private businesses that were left. It was Chavez who, hired millions of government workers, took them out of the private sector and put them in useless government agencies like the Vice Ministry for Supreme Social Happiness or for eco-socialism, ecological socialism. It was him who did that and destroyed our economy. Now Maduro, his successor, who was handpicked by Chavez, is the one that's running things. And guess what? Recently, they actually lifted price controls in Venezuela. And as a consequence, there are no more shortages in the country, which shows that it's not really even about political authoritarianism. Venezuela is still a tyranny. Yet, they lifted price controls and now there are no shortages. So it is really about the socialist policies that we're talking about, that economics is a science, a social science, but a science nonetheless, that works in Venezuela, in America, in Germany, in China, and in Africa, everywhere. And when price controls are imposed, there are shortages or there are surpluses. The economy is in imbalance. And when they're lifted, things work well. And that's what we need to teach kids.
And so before we get to the solutions a little bit, Daniel, it sounds like a lot of these socialist ideas that were pushed in Venezuela stem from the Marxist ideology, the real communists. So what did you see there? Was there Chinese influence?
Well, first, yes. It all comes from Marxism, right? Because that's, Marx was basically the founder of the socialist ideology. And it is all about a class warfare. It's about a warfare of dividing the population in different groups, either by income class or by race or by sex, and then pitting them against each other, saying that your problems are the fault of the other group. In Venezuela, if you're poor, it's because the rich are rich. And you hear that in America too. Or in America, you even hear if you're black and you're doing bad, it's because of the white people. And if you're an immigrant, it's because of the natives. And if you are, a woman, it's because of the men. And that's not how things really work, especially with wealth creation, especially with the division of rich and poor, right? Because it is usually, at least in the United States, if you are rich, it's because you create a value. And that's actually lifting people up from poverty because you create jobs, because you create products that make people's lives better. And so that's how people become rich. In Venezuela now, the only way to become rich under the socialist system is to be hooked up and corrupt with the regime. And so that's the Marxism that happened, right? Chavez would say being a rich person is a bad thing while he was wearing a Rolex watch. And there's videos and photos of this everywhere. So that's the hypocrisy of socialists. And China is very much involved, the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, when Chavez started printing all this money that created inflation because he wanted to spend all this on welfare and government jobs and things like that, who do you think gave him a lot of the money? It was the Chinese state-owned banks who lent Venezuela billions of dollars. And who do you think sold weapons to Venezuela? It was the Chinese. Who do you think, helps them with intelligence too in Venezuela? It's the Chinese. So that's the other thing, right? All these tyrannical regimes help each other. Iran is involved, Russia is involved, Cuba is involved, China's involved. All of them are a team. And what we need Americans to understand is that we need democracies and free countries to be a team against them. Otherwise, we're all divided and they're going to win.
So on this note of struggling against, say, class, race, sex, all of these things, in America, it seems socialism is gaining popularity, right? There's this recent poll that shows among young people especially, 4 out of 10 view it as a positive thing. And so what are the consequences of that going forward?
Well, the consequences is that they're going to be more likely to vote for politicians who promise them that we're going to give you this free thing, this other free thing. And look, everybody wants free things. If I'm offered something for free and I want it, I'll take it. But the problem is that the government, when they give us free things, they're not really free, right? They're free to us in the moment they give them to us, but somebody paid for it, and it's usually a taxpayer. And the problem in the United States is that we're already on a fiscally unsustainable path. Without approving any new spending, without any new program, we're already in an unsustainable path where the debt is going to grow so much that we're going to go into a debt crisis very soon, where Social Security is not going to have enough money to pay for its commitments, where Medicare is not going to have enough money to cover the medical needs of American seniors. And so when you hear things like, we need to give Medicare for all, we can't even pay for the Medicare we have now. If we want to expand these things, then you have to look for a way to pay for it through taxes. And if you want to imitate the Nordic countries, then sure, increase the sales tax to 25% and increase the payroll tax to 25%, from 12 now. And if you want to do that, then sure, but that's not going to be paid for by the rich, which is the lie that Americans are being told. They're being told that if you just increase taxes on millionaires by a little bit today, we're going to get all this incredible number of things in exchange. And that's not true. There's not enough money there. Even if we increase the taxes on the rich a little bit today, it's not enough to even put us on a sustainable path without new spending. So we need to teach American children the reality of our situation so that then they can make policy judgments, so that if they want to be like Denmark, they support the policies of Denmark instead of the policies of Venezuela, because nobody wants America to become like Venezuela.
So given the trajectory America seems to be on, you kind of mentioned earlier, Daniel, working with like-minded, freedom-loving countries. What would that look like in concrete steps?
Yeah, well, foreign policy-wise, we need free nations to, coalesce together, defend, what's happening in Ukraine now. We're helping Ukraine. That's fantastic, right? Because we're defending them against aggression from an authoritarian state like Russia. But it's not just that, right? It is, if in Latin America, the United States has stopped engaging, really. And we need to engage with Latin America because right now there's a Marxist wave of election victories across the region. Why? Because the Latin American citizens, many of them don't feel enfranchised by the economy. They feel like they've been given the short end of the stick and that they want to be more prosperous. And so they're lured by these free things as promises from these candidates. How can America change that? America needs to pursue free trade with America, with Latin American countries, right? That's the best way first to replace Chinese imports, with Latin American imports. And second, it's a way to make those countries wealthier, at the same time makes us wealthier. So we need to collaborate like that. We need free trade with free countries, not free trade with unfree countries. We need to impose sanctions on authoritarian regimes and not tolerate or subsidize their wars and their acts of terror. Like, right now, the Biden administration has lifted sanctions on Venezuela and on Cuba, some of them. Why are we doing this? There's for nothing in exchange. It's just nonsensical, and that's the problem, right? We need to have a comprehensive anti-authoritarian strategy in the free world, where free leaders, leaders of the free world meet and agree on things and steps to protect free nations from authoritarian attacks, and also to try to expand freedom in authoritarian nations, like providing free internet to Cubans from Miami through, with technology. We could do that today. Yes, it would cost some money, but that's what it takes to expand freedom. And I'm not talking about going to war. I'm talking about just practical steps to help people rise up in those countries. And we can do that, and we should do that. We have that duty.
And now zooming in on, say, the grassroots individual level, because a lot of this sounds like it's up to the individual, right? So going back to your dissident project, how can really the student movement help maybe expand out to make these policies happen?
Well, first, if you want to invite us to your schools, if you're a teacher, then just go to dissidentproject.org. So Dissident has double S, dissidentproject.org, and you can contact us. We'll send someone to your school, and it has no cost at all to a school. It is not free, right? A donor funds it. Nothing is free. But, the school won't pay for it, because I don't think the school should have to pay for this experience for the students, and want to make it accessible to everyone. And this is not going to have an immediate political impact. This is going to have an impact long term. And we hope that from this small start of the Dissident Project with 8 speakers, this grows. And it grows to many more speakers, and it grows to many more schools, so that it becomes a national movement where every single high school in the United States teaches about the evils of socialism. That's the ultimate goal. So it's that America will have a curricular policy in high schools across the country established by each state, like the state of Florida did, that is anti-socialist, that it is pro-freedom, and that is pro-America. That's the ultimate goal.
Daniel, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you on the show.
Thanks for the opportunity, Tiffany.
That was Daniel DiMartino, founder of the Dissident Project. And for those watching our full episode, joining us after the break, John Mills, retired colonel and former director of cybersecurity at the Defense Department. He touches on what the recent headlines on TikTok is revealing about the Chinese regime's cyber attacks on America and what it means for each individual. Our full episode can be watched on our partner platform at Bok TV. To sign up, click the link down below. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer, and see you soon.